Welcome to Leadership Kung Fu with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Hello, and welcome to another episode, the second of 2025, of Leadership Kung Fu. I am your host, Jennifer Long, here in Denver, Colorado, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host from Toronto, Canada, Sandi. How are you, Sandi?
I am great, and our U.S.-Canadian partnership is strong.
Our partnership is strong. Our trade is good.
Yes.
Sandi and I were just prepping to have a conversation today about conflict in leadership. And we can't sort of get started unless we sort of mention how distracted we both are by 12 days in office and how we're all a little bit unfocused here in the United States. So we are well aware that we've got leadership lessons and we'll be watching those because there's a lot to talk about there. But Sandi, tell us what we're going to talk about today, because we're not going to talk about trade tariffs.
We are not. We will not mention again, likely. We're going to talk about conflict today, and from a leadership perspective, and how important it is for leaders to have conflict, because it's inherently going to be part of their job, and for leaders to be self-aware around what type of conflict they're in and the type of their behaviors around conflict, so that their go-to behavior. Self-awareness is critical, and for leaders to not turtle and put their head in the sand, but to navigate the messiness of conflict. So that's sort of what we're going to be talking about today. Does that sound like a good plan, Jen?
I think, and it's timely. It's really timely, because I feel like this is an interesting time, and leaders are going to have conflict. And I think most leaders are aware of the fact that conflict is a good thing, right? It's not a bad thing. It results in better outcomes and better decisions when you're good at conflict. And so the point of this is, how do you get good? What does good look like? What kind of good can come from some of the conflict that y'all will be facing as leaders this year? Because you can't really lead without it. And that's the big point.
So maybe we should really start with, like, what is conflict? Because conflict is a dark word, right?
Yeah.
It conjures up all sorts of mean-spirited, duking it out sort of idea in the workplace. And we're not talking about that. We don't want people fighting in the boardroom.
Right.
But it's those things that are incongruent, right? That you don't agree with, that is difficult to reason with, that is unethical or appears to be unethical, that you need to tackle. And so thinking about conflict is although it's a big word, it's really about making sure that we are handling these things that are difficult like a kung fu master.
That's right. Right. It's recognizing the difficulty and the challenge. It's putting understanding, it's putting language, it's putting time around challenge and difficulty and perspective, because those are all elements. Those are what make it jagged. Those are what make it dark. Those are what make it. And when we get impatient, and when we don't listen, and when we operate out of fear, that's when conflict becomes unproductive. And that's when conflict is not offering what it can if you do it well. And so we're inviting you to embrace, to recognize. And I think part of it is recognizing you're in it, and knowing when it shows up, what does it look like, right? What is conflict looking like? And so we had sort of a brief conversation about all the different kinds of conflict. So maybe I'll talk about that, and then we can dive in to some of these things, right? And so conflict of the simple things, right? The task conflicts, the steps and the processes, right? Those are fairly simple and straightforward kinds of things that managers deal with. Then we've got role conflicts, right? And role conflicts, we were laughing earlier about RACI models, right? We use the RACI as a way to kind of define what's your role in this project, and how those can get misconstrued, and how people who are just supposed to be informed want to be informed a lot.
Yes, because the need to know versus want to know,
Yeah.
is super important to differentiate, right? And if you're in that I zone, you
Yeah.
don't get to be in the
Yeah.
other zones.
You don't get to be in the accountable zone, right?
No, no,
Yeah.
no.
So there's role conflicts, there's resource conflicts, right? Disputes over money and headcount and workspace or whatever you got going on. Structural conflicts, which I think are interesting because those are hierarchical issues, silo issues, and misalignment between functions, right?
Mhm.
Those are interesting to ferret out and have conversations about. But the tough ones, right? Conflict of ideas, uh, relationship conflicts where you really get into personality clashes around how people communicate and what they think is important, but values-based conflict, and that's certainly the hot button today for
Mhm.
everybody who's getting email from Elon Musk, right? Values-based conflicts around what's important
Yeah.
and what's ethical, and how political perspectives can jump in there. So those are all the flavors of conflict. And so from a leadership perspective, you're going to deal with some of the stickier ones,
Mhm.
um, that are a little deeper and take a little bit more effort.
Yeah, and we were talking about those ones that are the stickier ones, the more personal ones that are more internal, right? That we
Mm-hmm.
need to sort of differentiate between external conflict and internal conflict. So things that we can control a little bit more so than others, right? Structural conflict, we may not have the same influence or control over it, but
Mm-hmm.
if it's a personal, interpersonal conflict or a relationship conflict, you certainly have a lot of control over that. The important thing I think here is sort of to step back and say, well, what kind of conflict is it? Yeah, because now
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling it. What kind of is it? And how do I show up? So there's different ways of looking at uh, our our conflict behavior. How do we typically show up when something goes wrong? Right? You can feel it. You
Right.
manifest in your body. Right? You get red faced. You get panicky. You
Your
start to pick at your
tension.
hands. The
Yeah.
tension goes, and you know you're in it. And so how are you showing up in that moment? Because if
Right.
you feel it, everybody else is seeing it too. So just so you're aware,
Right.
you're not hiding it.
You're not hiding it. You tell your face you're not in conflict.
Yeah.
And it's having a good, I mean, this EQ skills massively important because you've got to be aware of how you're feeling and what is going on for you. Your body's going to react first, like we said. Then it's what's the emotion that's driving it, because that emotion is going to trigger for you what we call tapes in your head, the story you're going to tell yourself, right? The argument you start forming in your mind when something goes down, that narrative of where you are, because that narrative is then going to engage your behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you look at, right, self-awareness as a leader, what is your conflict behavior? When you
Mhm.
go into, when you experience conflict, what is your go-to when you're in that moment? Because we all tend to have one.
Yes.
And learning to recognize what yours is so that you can also learn to recognize what other people's conflict behaviors are.
Right.
That way you can tell you may not be in conflict, but they might be in conflict, especially if you're dealing with relationship issues and values issues.
Values issues. Yeah. Yeah. So are you someone who redirects,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or are you dealing with someone who's redirecting? Is sort of looking at, how are you handling it? Are you just going in a different direction so that you don't have to deal with it at that particular time? Are
Right.
you
Or
someone, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
right, stonewaller. Are
Yeah.
you someone who just shuts down a conversation?
Yeah.
Are you an arguer? Right?
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
there
A fist pumper,
yeah.
right?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
litigate this right here, right now. So
Yeah.
belittling can happen.
Mm.
So I mean
Hmm.
there's also people who just shut down.
Yeah.
right? They just nod their heads or quietly in the meeting or whatever it might be. And I think
Right.
the ones that when we think of conflict, we tend to think of the more assertive behaviors. We tend to think of the fist pounders, the arguers, the belittlers. And we don't recognize the people who are shutting down and stonewalling, because those are all withdrawing behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And when you withdraw, you essentially shut down conversation. And the number one thing you've got to do in conflict is talk about it.
Right. And as a leader, exceptionally important, right? Because you can't be a strong leader and sort of separate yourself from having these mucky conversations, whether you like them or not. It is part. You can't separate that part from leadership. They are inherently intertwined, and so to be a stronger leader, you really need to have some really strong EQ and introspective into how you are reacting, so that you can change your behavior, recognize it, and change it. Right? If you could name it, you can change it. Right, Jen?
That's right. You can name it, you can change it. That's the plan. But that's an interesting thing. It's also being able, the other awareness thing is the listening, right? And it's not just listening to what is the thing you're telling yourself, and having a recognition that you are in fact, and it's usually some kind of judgment or criticism of what's going on for you, but really being able to silence your own story.
Yeah.
To hear at a much deeper level what the perspective is of the other person, because you can't find innovation, you can't find mutuality, you can't find resolution unless you are paying attention at a deeper level. You got to show up with, I hear not only your words, which is usually where you go, and those are the arguers. I'm going to make a case. I'm just going to listen to what you're saying to me, and then I'm going to talk back.
Yeah.
Or over. But are you paying attention to how are they feeling? What is the emotional quality of what's going on? And when they speak, what are they telling you around what's important? What are they valuing in the context of their own conversation that you're picking up on?
Yeah.
And you can't hear any of that if you are having the conversation in your head, so you're making your case.
Yeah. And so maybe a good example of this might be you and I, Jen, are in the boardroom, and there's a group of people around us, and I throw out an idea that I'm quite attached to, right? We're going to do a strategy, and I really think this is an initiative that really should happen. And the room goes silent.
Yeah.
And then they move on. Right. So I'm in conflict now because I feel like I haven't been heard. I might be in conflict. I might be telling myself, my God, they never listen to me. My ideas are really, really good, and they never really listen to me. And, rather than saying, hold on, can we just circle back to this, which is going to feel difficult. I just need to understand what you thought about this and why we're discounting it. And so again, it goes into that sense of, I'm out of my head. I'm not going to tell these stories that I'm no good and people don't like me, but I'm going to go into curiosity, and I'm going to ask questions so that I can understand.
Right.
And I think that's a really critical, important lesson in all of this, because if we're not asking questions, we are only going to tell ourselves what we think we know to be true.
Exactly. And then I'm going to say to you later, after, I've convinced myself that you don't listen to me. Well, I said that 3 weeks ago when you guys finally come around.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You didn't listen.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a really, it's an important aspect of being a leader. And when you can do that, you've sort of stretched your leadership muscle, if you will, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Because it's emotional, and you are in a vulnerable place when you're there. And that's the curiosity is the best antidote, because it's an easy way to understand, hey guys, I put an idea out and y'all gave me silence. Help
Mhm.
me understand what that was about. Right. And you have to be vulnerable in that moment to say, that felt weird to me. I'm feeling like I just got ignored. Help me understand. And when you're in an emotional place, it's hard to gather your rational faculties.
Mhm.
But in speaking, in engaging language and dialogue, and in harnessing curiosity, you're able to release some of the fear. It's part of the beauty of how language impacts your neurochemistry.
Mhm. Mhm. So I think that's an important thing to remember. I think the other thing you talked about perspective, and when you're going into a potentially conflicting conversation, you have your perspective, right? You haven't yet engaged with the other person. Stepping back and asking yourself what might be their perspective before you engage with them opens it up to possibility, right? And so you're not stuck. I remember like years ago, when I first did my first coaching program, and they had us around a room. I don't know if you ever had to do this exercise, but we're in a circle and we're like a pie shaped, and everybody had a little space to stand in. And we had to have an idea and what your perspective was on, and then you had to go around to a different one and the different perspectives. It's like, what would your mother's perspective be on this, and what would your dog's perspective be on this, and what would your cat think? But I use that exercise in different ways because it really gets people out of their head and realize that there is more than one way to look at something.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fun exercise, but it does work.
Well, and I think that's part of the issue is we don't understand the impact of where we're heading and what that impact is on other people. What that I mean, especially when you're conflict around decisions or directions or things of this nature, is what have we not considered, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we moving through that are important and are uh so when those perspectives of we're gonna we're gonna bring everybody back to work, like
Yeah.
what is that gonna do to a lot of how things have now become operational, and where are have you really looked at your HR impacts and really looked at your process impacts, and like somebody in the room is gonna have a thought about what that is.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's why it does create that innovation, right? I think conflict it can create innovation and creativity if used in the right way, and that's a really good example, because how many businesses now in 2025 in the last 6 months have said no, we want people back,
Mhm.
and so we don't want you at the petting zoo anymore with your laptop. We want you, in your chair beside us, so we can watch what you're doing, and it's created all sorts of conflict within organizations.
Mhm. And this is, when you think just about that whole thing in and of itself, what are you not considering? And when you listen to what they tell you, what ideas does it give you instead
Hmm.
of what case can you make? How do you defend your decision,
Yeah.
right? And I think we so often go into defense instead of, well, what would that mean? Tell me more about what you're thinking and why it's going to, like, and how could we address that, and how could we say yes and to something. And I think that leaders are in an interesting place, and Sandy and I kind of talked about this a little bit too, is I do think we are having such a leadership crisis on so many levels and in so many ways, because we don't see work the same anymore. And
Hmm.
so that in and of itself is a fundamental conflict.
Yeah.
And the which is kind of the reason why we're doing this episode to begin with, because there's so many things that are conflicting.
Hmm.
And as you're moving your business forward and you're thinking about what's going to add value, you have to be open. You have to be at least willing to rise out of your feeling, rise out of your perspective, rise out and open up a little bit to say, where's the mutual gain for us? Where's the opportunity for us that we haven't tapped on in this difference, in this effort that we have? And what am I willing to say about what I want and what I'm afraid of and what I'm concerned about? I'm afraid about the bottom line. I'm afraid about all these real estate leases, all these empty cubicles, all this hardware that's going to, all the things. And how does that conversation actually trigger a different conversation? Because that's where the new idea lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to live in your existing mindset. It's going to live in the fact that we brought something else up and it created a different conversation.
Yes.
And
And to that, I would say also, it doesn't make you weak to engage with others, right? Just because you have a leader, manager, VP, CEO, whatever in your title, you are not always right. And, we have built organizations with people, really good people in order to move organizations forward. You're not doing it on your own. And so it doesn't make you weak to engage, to be curious, to find out more about what other people think. It also means that you may not ever move off your position,
mhm.
right? You don't have to necessarily move off your position, but you have to engage to make sure that there isn't a better position out there.
Well, and how do you sell your position based on what they bring you?
Mhm.
Right? Is I hear the things, I hear the things. Let me share my position. Let me share my reasoning. It's no different than we all want to know why. We want to understand the context of why the boundary lives here now and why the boundaries were moved, or how does this line up to the organizational values or the things we're trying to achieve this year, right?
Mhm.
How because there has to be sense making in how you got to a position,
Yeah.
and your ability to articulate that upon hearing all of the other things and to stand your ground, right? If you're going to do that, how are you doing that in a way that connects to the concerns, the worries, the fears, all the things that were brought into that conflict?
Mhm. Yeah. One of the things I like to tell leaders is, talk less, listen more. And
Mm.
if you're doing all the talking, then you're not listening. If you're doing all the talking, everybody else is zoning out. So, talk less, listen more. You're going to get so much more out of it than
You may
living in a
realize
vacuum.
you didn't make considerations around some things that
Mhm.
suddenly realize, oh, that didn't even occur to me when I set this hard line. Right? Or that didn't occur to me when I brought this perspective to the table. And your willingness to demonstrate learning in the moment, your willingness to go, "Oh, I know how to make this even better now." I mean,
Mhm.
it's just but that's mastery over openness. That's mastery over curiosity. That is, and my favorite phrase and the simplest thing is when you get into conflict and you're emotional and you're arguing in your head, instead of fighting back, just say, "Tell me more."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's important to know that you can validate emotions
Yeah.
without without agreeing with them, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if we take this down to a level of a leader having to have a one-on-one conversation with someone perhaps who's not doing their job or appears to not be doing their job, um, there, I was joking with Jen before that whole idea of sandwich, like hit him with a good thing, hit him with a bad thing, and then wrap it up with a good thing. What do they remember?
The good thing, and
What
why are we talking about this? Or the bad thing, and you're such a jerk.
right? They're not going to remember. They're not going to feel good, feel bad, feel good. It's just it was a ridiculous concept. Um, but sort of stand at it in terms of coming to the conversation with intent. Like this is the intent of the conversation, and at the outcome, I'd like this. So really clear on what it is that you want to talk about and what you want to have happen. So at the end, I want us to have a mutual agreement, whatever it might be. Um, but from a professional standpoint, is really coming at it and not dancing around the bush, I guess.
Well, and if you're gonna create a hard line, right, and you know you're gonna have conflict,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've got to be prepared for that, and you've got to embrace those things because those people want to get heard, right? And there's those kinds of approaches to conflict, but there's also if you're working leader to leader across what's negotiable?
Yeah.
Where is your bottom line on something, and where do you feel their bottom line is? And if you are gonna approach this more effectively, do not always look at an issue just from your perspective, right? So we talked about the pie slices, but standing in someone else's shoes and really thinking through what would they be, what are they afraid of? Where where are they getting rewarded and against what's going on for them? What is
Mm-hmm.
important in their world? And how might I bring that to the conversation such that if I'm in my considerations, how does that help me negotiate better? Get to a place of negotiation even, right?
Negotiation 101, right? What is your, the bare minimum? What is your
Mhm,
ceiling? And, where do we sort of match in the middle to get to that win-win situation?
mhm.
But in order to do that, you have to be open to have that conversation, because you're never going to
Absolutely.
have win-win if you're closed.
And when you're in the same organization, there is a win-win. There
Mm-hmm.
is always a win-win. And that's always what I find frustrating when you're dealing with people who are dealing with other parts of the organization and they just are, oh my God, there's just no talking. And it's like, no, look, you guys all work for the same company. You're actually on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Figure it out, figure out where it is. And what that means is spend the time. And this is where I live. Brene Brown in her It's Really Hard to Hate Up Close, right? Don't do this in an email. Don't do this. Conflict doesn't happen on messages. Conflict doesn't happen well. You're never going to get the benefit of resolution, of mutuality, of innovation if you're not eyeball to eyeball, either on
Mm-hmm.
camera or in front of each other.
Yeah. Even camera to camera is a little bit difficult, right? There's
Yeah.
something to be said about personal space and being in the same room, and to really really see body language that's not just at your neck up,
Hmm.
right? So um, for all
Yeah.
of you that really only want to be at home, there is a time and place to be together, and when you're having difficult conversations, I would suggest that is one of them for sure.
Exactly. And so not only is it just the listening and the eye contact and all the things, but you need increased versatility in your communication.
Mhm.
Do not come to conflict in your style and stick in it.
Yeah. No.
People cannot hear you if they're a different style and they're in conflict. And
Hmm.
yes, they should be listening at the same level. But if you're going to practice for you, how you listen can set the tone of the conversation to begin with.
Hmm.
The questions you ask are going to set the tone of how open it's going to be, and how willing someone else is going to be to participate in the event. And when you can meet someone in their communication style, if they're more soft spoken, if they're more um, uh, cautious, if they're more reflective, let's use all the disc words, right? If they're in those mindsets of how they relate, and you're coming in with your D style results, don't tell me I'm wrong. I've got a whole argument for
Just
you.
do an attitude.
To move through this, right? You're going to do much better to meet them where they are.
Hmm.
And that is as much a part of strategy in terms of good conflict, because you should definitely feel outside your comfort zone and open and willing in a way you're not normally, which is counterintuitive to shut it down, defend it, and let's just close the book on this.
Hmm. And I think the other thing to also remember is, if you're in that moment, you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere, right? You're both in defense mode or in combat mode. It's okay, and it is appropriate to say, I think we just need to take 5 minutes. I don't think we're going to get anywhere. I think we need to sort of reboot our brains a little bit on this and come back and maybe, think about things a little bit differently. Like diffuse the situation, step back, and then come back, because you're not always going to see it, the same way, right? And so,
Yeah.
being a leader says step into that leadership role and call it what it is, in a way that allows somebody else to see maybe what's happening at the same point, right? Because the level of EQ is not always matched person to person. And so I might be thinking, oh, I just need to be less defensive, and that other person behind across is like, nope, I'm going. I'm the D. I'm going. So it's okay, and it is not a sign of weakness to stop and say, I think we just need a quick minute, a break, and regroup on this.
Right.
Tell
And
them why.
those are time bound, right?
Yeah,
Because you
yeah,
can't de-escalate to manipulate. You have to de-escalate to decompress.
yeah,
And that's when you really just need to walk and breathe and figure out when is a good time. Mornings are better than afternoons, when people have better energy, better perspective.
yeah.
And there, honest to God, is something about sleep on it. Sleep on it. And taking it to the next day is perfectly acceptable when it's intense, when it's, if you're in a team to team and you've got cohorts of people and it's a lot of people thinking, sometimes it's a sleep on it thing. Let's all just take this away. And then, and there's, all kinds of tools. And I think mostly we focused on sort of the interpersonal one-to-one, which I think in so many ways is really the important bar setter. And if you get good at one-to-one, group settings can get a little easier.
Yeah. But on a future podcast, we will talk about team and conflict and the role of the leader in that. I think would be a good one to maybe shed some light on.
Yeah. When you get ganged up on.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know what else we can offer in terms of dealing with it well. Is don't avoid it, don't walk away from it, don't ignore it,
Navigate it.
recognize it and embrace it. And it's a gift. It's a gift to get a different perspective. It's a gift to know that there's people that think differently. It's a gift to know there's something else that you haven't considered. And just be willing and just be mindful of when you're in that triggered state. Know what your game is so that you can demonstrate how, because as you lead, you teach others what leadership looks like.
Yeah.
And if you can't handle conflict, what you tell people is it's okay to handle it like an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. So know what your conflict behavior is and how and what your triggers are. I think those are important takeaways, and that requires some self-reflection. And sometimes it's not in the moment, right? Maybe it's after. You're going, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and sort of name these things, and so that you can get good at recognizing them in the moment. But it's a practice, right? The art of Kung Fu is very much similar to that. We talk about that all the time. Leadership is a practice, and you need to try it over and over and over again and do your learnings. You need to fail. You need to try in order to master any piece of leadership, and conflict's just one of them.
Exactly. And it's becoming more and more, I mean, politics and the United States aside, that running different value sets through different groups of people in the organization and where they are and what's important, and just navigating the new world of work, values have become more and more important. Personal values not lining up with work values, and some of these decisions these are meaningful conversations, and your thoughtfulness around it instead of your defensiveness around it is what's going to set you apart in terms of how you bring your business into a different state, into a value add as you make decisions. And people are going to have, your social capital as a leader is at stake every time you get into conflict.
Yes.
And you burn that social capital as a leader when you do it poorly. And I think that's probably one of the most important things you need to realize is there is a cost of doing conflict poorly.
Absolutely. Okay. So hopefully that gave our listeners some ideas on how to deal with conflict right, and how to learn from conflict, and how to be a kung fu master around conflict. And, we welcome you to send us your ideas, your questions that we could possibly answer for you on future podcasts. Give us feedback. Share our links with everybody else that that needs to learn about leadership and leadership.
Yes,
kung
it's
fu
going to be
and
a hot year
mastery.
for leadership. It's going to be a hot year for
It
here in
is.
the United States and every other country that's getting bullied. It's going to be a hot year for leadership.
That's right. And we said we wouldn't mention it again, but there it went.
Because we're completely distracted by it. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Tell your friends, download us, share your links, and we'll talk to you on the next one. Bye, Sandi.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandi's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI Consulting INC.ca. And you can check out Jen's website at accountabilityatwork.com. If you like what you hear, let us know by leaving a review on your favorite listening platform. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.